Congressman Mark Pocan is back with us. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. He's a current member and the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's the co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus and chair of the Congressional Equity Caucus, or Quality Caucus, excuse me. Pocan, Pocan.house.gov is his website. It's also his Blue Sky handle. And Congressman, welcome back to the program. What's on your mind today?
Well, thanks for having me, Tom. This is a week that members of Congress, at least in the House, I think it's true of the Senate, but we're in district. And this is a good opportunity for people, if they're having town halls, or quite honestly, make people have impromptu town halls if it's a Republican district where they're refusing to do them. I did one last night in Derek Van Orden's district in Wisconsin's 3rd district, a Republican who has a swing seat here in my state. I went to La Crosse. We had over 350 people show up. Bernie Sanders called in with a message of inspiration. And, I really do feel, based on the election we had in Wisconsin in April, the results in that special election in Pennsylvania, what we saw in the congressional special elections in Florida, people are pissed, they're upset, they're concerned, they're scared, and they are ready to see some real change. And I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing, keep going into these Republican districts and forcing Republicans to have some accountability. And if we do that, I'm feeling very optimistic based on, again, what I saw last night in La Crosse, Wisconsin. By the way, Tom, someone said, I'm a regular listener of Thom Hartmann. Someone else put a question in about you. You've got a lot of fans in Western Wisconsin. I want to share that.
That's great to know. That's great to know. It's a great state, and in fact, we're picking up some new radio stations there, I believe, today.
Awesome.
So I'm curious your thoughts on the Bernie AOC tour and on this growing sentiment that AOC is now the leading candidate for the Democratic nomination for president, 3.5 years down the road.
Yeah, I think what Bernie and AOC are doing is amazing, right? Having these huge crowds talking about economic populism. I mean, things that you and I have talked about for years and years and years on your program, right? To see that now, the people coming out because they're hungry to find that alternative to Donald Trump, and they agree with us. We've always known that on these issues. But I don't want to forget the members that are doing town halls in Republican districts, or the members, Chris Murphy and I think Maxwell Frost have been going around also doing some of those around the country. I know Greg Kassar from the Progressive Caucus and others, Ro Khanna. I don't want to start saying names. I'm going to get in trouble. But many members are doing more because that's what's required at this moment. And I think the fact that people are turning out like they're turning out in record numbers, and we're all getting record contacts in our offices, just shows how hungry people are to protect this nation. So I see a lot of good. I've really been actually very optimistic lately in watching what's happening around the country. And I think those big kind of high profile things like that Bernie and AOC are doing is especially helpful in just letting people know, look, a lot of people agree with you. You're on the right side of issues. We don't need to listen to consultants and corporate Dems. We know where the party's at. We know where the people are at. And that's a winning cause.
Yeah, I get it. Axios this morning published a newsletter that's rather alarming, that Trump wants to go after U.S. citizens who criticize his anti-terrorism policies, which are defined as people opposing Israel's Gaza activity and people who are condemning his actions against immigrants and deportations. Let me just read you 4 sentences here and get your feedback on this. And if you think Congress is going to respond to this, quote, Trump administration officials are suggesting their immigration crackdown could expand to include deporting convicted U.S. citizens and charging anyone, not just immigrants, who criticize Trump's policies. Some officials say U.S. citizens who criticize administration policies could be charged with crimes based on the notion that they're aiding terrorists and criminals. White House Senior Director for Counterterrorism, Sebastian Gorka, said in an interview with Newsmax, quote, you have to ask yourself, are they technically aiding and abetting them? Because aiding and abetting criminals and terrorists is a crime, end quote. Trump's team has also questioned the legality of civic groups providing immigrants with know your rights trainings on how to respond to federal agents. Border czar Thom Hartmann suggested that such seminars help people, quote, evade law enforcement. They're just right up front right now talking about people like you and me who criticize the administration they've already pulled all these visas, over 100 over 1,000, I guess, visas from students all around the country who have criticized Israel's policies. And they're all facing deportation. But now they're saying charging people like you and me who simply condemn Israel's actions in Gaza or who condemn Trump's deportations as aiding terrorism, using the Patriot Act, and then arresting us and deporting us to El Salvador. What say you?
I think this is going to be more failures by Donald Trump, to be real honest. We had a student in Wisconsin just last week won a case where they tried to go after her. They weren't able to. Donald Trump's bravado, from the last presidency, about 10% of what he said became true. This time, I think it's probably more like 25% because he's got a lot of complicity with Congress. But, the hard part is figuring out what that 25% is. But much of his actions that are illegal, he's largely been stopped. There have been over 60 adjudications against him by over 45 judges, including judges appointed by Donald Trump. So largely the rule of law is holding. And what he's saying, again, isn't going to work with the rule of law. This is more of Donald Trump. And don't forget what he did just yesterday. He caved now on tariffs with China. This guy is the caver in chief. But he likes to say a lot. He takes multiple positions on multiple issues so people hear what they want to hear. But at the end of the day, right now the rule of law is holding, and we just have to make sure we're supporting the litigation that is supporting the American people. And eventually, I think the biggest signal we send to Donald Trump is by sending him a new Congress next year.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's reassuring. 14 and a half minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan in Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann program. Stick around. We'll be right back. I'm back. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thank you. I am very concerned about people standing up to Trump. Senator Lisa Murkowski said she's afraid, like everyone else is afraid, to stand up to Donald Trump. And I don't understand it. He's even in this Ukraine deal they think he's going to cave to Putin because Putin's willing to give him a Trump Tower in Moscow.
That's right.
I mean, how does someone personally gain in a negotiation? So here's my point. If they can't stand up to Trump, like this deal with Ukraine, and allow Europe to come into it, they've got a vested interest in that negotiation. If politicians are so afraid of him, they can't make common sense with him, then maybe they should step down, leave their seat, empty it for someone who says, I will stand up to Trump, like Jasmine Crockett. I mean, can you believe her?
Yeah. Well, let's get Congressman Pocan's thoughts on your comments, Diane.
So, Diane, first of all, I mean, we just all have to recognize Donald Trump is a corrupt thug, right? Certainly, we're seeing corruption with him and Elon Musk and the administration, and we just talked about with Russia, clear more corruption with Donald Trump. But he's also a thug. And what we were told by a Democratic senator who's been around for a long time is that there were at least 4 Republican senators that would have voted against some of the cabinet picks that are awful. And there are many awful cabinet picks that Donald Trump had. But it wasn't just that they were getting death threats, which we all sort of get. It's kind of maybe part of, unfortunately, the job. But their family members were getting death threats. And that was why they just didn't want to stand up against MAGA, and they supported some of these.
Mitt Romney came right out and said that.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is current senators, too. 4 current senators said they would have voted against them. So, I agree with the sentiment, Diane, that, they should just leave. The problem is, they're afraid in the Republican Party because Donald Trump has so much influence with primaries. And Elon Musk, to a lesser degree, he's got lots of money to throw around, right? He bought Donald Trump's victory with $277 million. But he just failed miserably in Wisconsin with over 20 million. So maybe he's not as scary, but I do what I'm hearing from Republicans, again, from people who talk to them directly in the Senate, is that they're just afraid because the death threats to their family members.
What's it going to take for the fever to break?
You need a few Republicans to channel their inner Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger and do the right thing. And, if they have numbers, they could do this. But usually it turns out to be people who've decided they're just leaving because they can't take it anymore. But you need someone still strong enough because it's still a rough ride with these. Yeah.
Don Bacon just spoke out against him the day before yesterday, as I recall. He's one of your colleagues in the House, a Republican. Do you think the fist is going to come down on his head?
I'm sure he's getting some pressure. And of course, he has a swing district. So that's why, but you need more. There's a lot more. I would argue after that Wisconsin election, because the turnout was really the real story, Tom, that it was thought Democrats or Republicans, people are just wanting to be heard. If you won by less than 10 points in the last congressional election, your seat is at risk right now. And you either figure out how to deal with your constituents or you figure out how to get a discount card at Costco to buy Depends by the carton because you're going to need them.
Yeah, I get it. 19 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan, Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus representing Wisconsin's 2nd District, is with us for the hour taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for Representative Pocan in just a moment. Stay with us. Congressman Mark Pocan, Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, with us for the hour taking your calls, middays with Mark. And Bill in Richmond, Virginia, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes. Good morning or afternoon, gentlemen, depending on where you are. The thing I was telling your screener was this, and I was listening to Dan Abrams on one of the on Post this morning, and he brought up something that was kind of interesting, and I think it swings both ways. A year ago, the left, or liberals, or Democrats, were screaming bloody murder about the Supreme Court, about the fact that it wasn't valid. I know that there were demonstrations a while back around all the justices' houses. But ironically, the whole thing about rule of law, well, that ruling on Saturday night, that midnight ruling, is something that probably I know has driven the Trump people crazy, but it should be something that shows the left. And he brought the point up. You might disagree with the ruling, but it's not historically a thing about going ad hominem about all the justices. Now, I'm sure the right after that Saturday night ruling is going to be up in arms and everything else about all the crazy litigation. But it seems like to me, I said this time before, there's a certain hypocrisy on both sides of the aisle. And I want to see if the congressman agrees with me on that or tells me I'm wrong.
Yeah, Bill, I don't know if I would say hypocrisy. I mean, what we're finding is there is a rule of law, that our nation is built on laws, and they're largely holding when it goes to Donald Trump doing things that are unconstitutional or against the laws of the nation. And we've had over 45, I think it is now, different judges, including some appointed by Donald Trump, adjudicate on our behalf on like 60 cases. So it's not like it's one district they're all taking these cases to. This is largely the legal system working, rule of law working. And as you said, this weekend when the Supreme Court made that declaration, the bus turned around. They're largely complying with this. I talked to the Attorney General in Wisconsin, Josh Kaul, and he reiterated how much they are following it. Now, there's a couple high-profile cases, Mr. Garcia going to El Salvador, and I think the AP News case that are probably pushing that, and that's where we're going to find out constitutional crisis or not at some point. Right now, they're debating the word facilitate. But in general, the rule of law is working, and that means our nation's working.
Alfredo in Mountain View, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have about 2 minutes, by the way, to the break.
Thank you for taking my call, and thank you for your service, Congressman Pocan. My question is pertaining to Trump. He has repeatedly stated that he wants to stay in power for a third term in office, which is unconstitutional and illegal. And I think the reason why he is defying the courts, including the Supreme Court, is because he wants to do this perhaps by enacting the Insurrection Act and suspending the Constitution. What are the Democrats going to do about this if he tries to do that? And I take my answer of the air. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Alfredo, it won't just be the Democrats. I think there will be some Republicans when that, if that would ever happen. But honestly, I think this is Donald Trump bravado. He just loves to talk. Greenland's never going to be a part of the U.S. Canada's not going to be the 51st state. And Donald Trump is not going to have a third term. And he puts all this out there to distract us. The number one thing, their holy grail, is the tax cuts for the wealthiest. And Thom, the Joint Committee on Taxation said that $4.5 trillion that was supposed to be the cost of extending Trump's tax cuts is now $5.5 trillion. Whoa. So $1 trillion more. And the bill that was just voted on by the House and the Senate added another $1.5 trillion for other potential tax cuts. So we're up to maybe $7 trillion. That's their holy grail. It's all about themselves and their pocketbooks and Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the people who can afford to be in Mar-a-Lago. So I'm not going to be distracted by something I don't think is ever going to happen. We're always ready if they try something. But the reality is, between now and Memorial Day, they want to vote on all those cuts to Medicaid, to food assistance, to education, to the Affordable Care Act in order to fund those tax cuts. The wins we can have is stopping them from doing that. And I'm going to, Thom, be very laser focused on making sure that they don't do that.
Is their legislation still largely kind of unstructured, advisory, as opposed to specific cuts?
Yeah, it's set the parameters, how much they're going to have for cuts.
When do they get specific?
Committee has to cut between now and Memorial Day. That's when they're trying to do all this. So when we go back next week, committees will start debating and talking about what those, and then we have to vote on them. That's why we can defeat them. How can a member like David Valadao from California, where over 60% of his constituents are on Medicaid, vote against Medicaid?
I get it. Right? I get it. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour. Middays with Mark, taking your calls. Fair in Stoddard, New Hampshire. Fair, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks, Mark. This sort of got covered already. You were talking about how the Republicans, even though they would speak up, that they are being threatened and their families are being threatened. And it's just pretty astounding to me. I mean, it seems like if we could get 5 Republicans that would stand up for the Constitution and the rule of law and, you know, the institutions that they're supposed to be protecting, that there would be enough of a majority in Congress to do that. And that maybe somebody like me, who's in New Hampshire, and I have Democratic congresspeople, but I would be willing to write a Republican congressperson in another state saying that I support them. You know, if you and Thom could figure out who are the people that would be most likely that might give, you know, and start acting like real people, real Congress people.
Yeah, let's get his.
Yeah, fair. So, there's no question that silence is being complicit with what's going on, right? So, unfortunately, there are some folks just being quiet who know better. Republicans have said things to me, including things like, you know, when the student was snatched at Tufts, you're going to do something about that, right? I'm like, well, yeah, but you can, right? Or people who say they don't know on with Doge, but they don't speak out. So silence is being complicit. The problem is, and I think it's important just to remind people of this, Thom, is that, you know, writing to people who aren't your reps isn't especially productive, in the sense that, like, if you go to my website, if your zip code doesn't match a zip code in my district, you can't even leave a message, because we don't have that many staff to deal with the intake we have. We had to respond to 18,000 people 1 week recently, Thom. It's a lot for a couple people that do that in the office.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the recommendation, but we do need Republicans to maybe reach out to or if you have a Republican rep, absolutely reach out to them and try to put that pressure. Think about it. You're right. If 5 people just kind of stuck together, 3 seats is all we need to get the majority, you could then start having a spine and they could then stand up for themselves. But how embarrassing to go to work every day and to let those threats dictate what you're doing. I think a lot of people may just decide not to run again, given, if they are the type of people that you want to convert. But it really would be great to have some profiles and courage.
Yeah, amen. By the way, Dick Durbin just said he's not going to run for re-election.
Yes.
He's been a good guy. I've criticized him a lot for, respecting blue slips and things when Mitch McConnell wouldn't. But, I think on net, he's been a very good senator. Any quick thoughts on that before we go to the next caller?
No, I think I saw a list today of 3 of my colleagues from the House that may be running for that, a lieutenant governor, and I think there's a state senator and probably others. That's always a U.S. Senate seat is going to be very competitive. But
Yeah.
I think Dick Durbin was one of the people that always tried to do the right thing.
Yeah, there you go. Simon in Steilacoom, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Okay, actually, I have a question for both of you. And is it, so do you think we've reached the point of late-stage capitalism where we have allowed such a system? So people talk about, of course, like money in politics, and they talk about corruption, they talk about lobbyists, but we've allowed such a system where corporations own airlines, where a few corporations own airlines, like cereal or water, where there's so much consolidation, even when it comes to European countries, social democracies, like Bernie talks about, but there are capital strikes, and there's still a huge income gap. And we've seen in systems like under Salvador Allende and Jacobo Arbenz in Latin America, where workers truly had power. There were free market exchange. There were like regular free market exchanges.
Simon, what's your question?
There wasn't this Sorry. Let me. I'll finish in a bit. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, you're giving a speech here. What's your question?
Okay, is like, should us American citizens and progressives settle for more than we already have? Past the point, even beyond capitalism, and should that be mainstreamed or even indicated by even certain Congress people like yourself, Pocan?
Yeah, let me answer it this way, Simon. I think there is an attempt to have another Gilded Age, right, under Donald Trump. Clearly, all the billionaires he's brought into his administration, the fact that, their holy grail is a tax cut again for the wealthiest, and that should get pushback from the American people. And I think we saw that in the Wisconsin election, the Florida elections, in Republican districts that were much closer than they should have. We saw it in a special election in the legislature in Pennsylvania. And I think the fact that Bernie and AOC going around with the message being about the oligarchs is certainly proving that people care about that message. So I agree that we should talk about it much more. I think economic populism is always a great place to talk about because the average, 40% of people don't have $400 for an emergency expense. Mm-hmm. It impacts real people. Always should talk about that. And I do think there is the pressure of this trying to have a resurgence of a Gilded Age by Donald Trump. And I think that's going to ultimately be their fall.
Morris in Inglewood, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, check this out. The Pope died. The Pope died shortly after meeting with J.D. Vance. And so the Dalai Lama, he refused to meet with J.D. Vance, just giving you a heads up. But listen, Congressman, when people do things, it's because somebody inspired them. Okay, they heard somebody inspired them to do something. And Thom Hartmann has inspired an occupied White House this summer. Okay, occupied, and I just want to know from you, if when they do have this occupied White House this summer, is you or is you ain't going to be one of the people that's out there with us? Are you willing to be handcuffed? Are you willing to be arrested? Are you willing to be demonized on Fox News? And I'll take your answer off the air. Yeah,
Morris has been calling for this on the program here for a couple of weeks now, that we need to occupy the White House. Your thoughts? Yeah,
Morris, as I said, this is the first time I'm hearing it, so I don't know if I have an answer because I don't really know what exactly it is. But hey, I think I'm demonized on a pretty regular basis on Fox News, from what I understand. Look, I do think we need to do things that are outside the box right now because the Republicans are. But the good news is people also feel that way. People are pissed. They're afraid, they're concerned, and we need to make sure that, especially as an elected official, I'm matching that intensity because I also am all of those things. And I think, the more we work together and protect every group that's being attacked, the more we're going to come out of this in the right end. And I think, this may be it's absolutely an overreach by Donald Trump and what he's trying to do. And I think this may be that opportunity we need. And I do think focusing on the economic conditions of this country is in particular a smart message.
Anita in Lexington, Michigan. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Congressman Pocan. It's Ludington, Michigan.
Oh, Ludington. Okay, I'll fix that. Thank you. I've been to Ludington.
Ludington's beautiful.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. Anyway, my question is, I'm involved with our community action committee, and we have been worried about some of the things that are happening as we're seeing, like LIHEAP for low-income heating assistance disappear. We've seen Head Start 5 of the district offices have disappeared, and I hear the president's got it zeroed out, his budget. And, is there a way for us to have, what should we do to, we've talked to congressmen, we've went out and protested. Your ideas, Congressman.
Yeah, Anita. So first of all, I mean, if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. All right. And I know it's a bumper sticker, but it's what's happening right now. The people have been leading, and that's why you're finally maybe seeing more elected officials do to stand up against this. But when it comes to appropriations, and that's what